PHP is a server-side scripting language that's widely used for building dynamic and interactive websites. It allows developers to create pages that respond to users, such as login forms, search tools, or dashboards that show real-time information. Unlike simple HTML, PHP can connect with databases, process user input, and generate customized web content instantly. One of the biggest strengths of PHP is its flexibility and simplicity. It's easy to learn, works on almost every operating system, and integrates smoothly with web servers like Apache. That's why it remains one of the most popular choices for back-end web development. Now, from this point onward in this course, we'll assume that XAMPP is already installed on your computer. XAMPP includes Apache, PHP version 8.0.13, and MySQL, all packaged together for easy use. All the PHP code examples you'll see next will be written and executed in this XAMPP environment on a Windows system. So before continuing, make sure your XAMPP installation is complete and working properly. In short, PHP gives your website life. It makes it interactive, connected to databases, and capable of delivering a true dynamic user experience. When you open a PHP web page in your browser, for example, a file called index.php, something interesting happens in the background. The browser doesn't directly read that file from your computer. Instead, it sends a special message called an HTTP request to your web server. This message basically says, "Hey server, please find this file called index.php and show me the result." Now, once the request reaches the web server, which could be Apache or Nginx, the server starts searching for the file index.php in its directory. If the file exists, the server passes it on to the PHP interpreter. This interpreter is like a translator. It reads and executes the PHP code inside the file. For example, if your PHP code contains commands to display text, connect to a database, or process a form, the interpreter executes all of that and then sends the final output, usually plain HTML, back to the browser. The user never sees the PHP code itself, only the output it generates. But if the server cannot find the file you requested, it will send back an error 404, which means file not found. This is a common message you've probably seen on websites when a page doesn't exist. It's also important to understand that the web server only sends files with a .php extension to the PHP interpreter. If the file is something like .html or byte.htm, it will be served directly to the browser without any PHP processing, even if you accidentally write PHP code inside it. So in short, 1. You type a PHP page address in your browser. The browser sends a request to the server. The server finds the file and sends it to the PHP interpreter. The interpreter runs the PHP code and sends back HTML to the browser. This is how PHP creates dynamic, database-connected, and interactive web pages every time you visit a site. Once the PHP file is sent to the interpreter, the real work begins. The PHP interpreter carefully scans through the file, line by line, looking for the opening and closing PHP tags. These tags are written as $PHP to start and to close. Only the code written inside these PHP tags is executed. Everything else, like normal HTML text, is ignored by the interpreter and sent directly to the browser as it is. Now, as the interpreter processes the PHP code, it begins to execute every command, one by one. This could include displaying text, performing calculations, or connecting to a database. If your PHP code involves working with a database, such as MySQL, the interpreter first checks if a database connection exists. If it finds one and the authentication is correct, it will send data to the database or retrieve information from it, depending on what your code instructs. For example, when a user logs into a website, PHP verifies their username and password against the information stored in the database. If the details match, access is granted. If not, an error message is displayed. All of this processing happens quietly on the server side, completely hidden from the user. Once PHP has finished executing all its code, it converts the output into simple HTML. That HTML response is then sent back to the browser, which displays it as a normal web page for the user. So remember this, the browser never sees the actual PHP code. It only receives the final HTML output generated by PHP after all processing is done on the web server. In short, the PHP interpreter runs your logic, handles database communication, and sends a clean HTML page to the user's screen, all within milliseconds. That's the true power of PHP running behind the scenes of dynamic websites. Now that we understand how PHP works behind the scenes, let's learn how to actually write PHP scripts. To write PHP code, we need a simple text editor, but not just any editor. Instead of using the default Notepad, developers prefer advanced code editors that make the job easier and faster. Editors like Notepad++, Sublime Text, or Atom are highly recommended. These editors come with very helpful features like syntax highlighting, autocomplete, and error detection, which help you identify mistakes quickly and make your code easier to read. Now, let's talk about the basic structure of a PHP script. A PHP file usually contains three main parts. Part 1, the PHP start and end tags. The start tag is written as $PHP, and the end tag is $!. Everything written between these two tags is treated as PHP code and executed by the PHP interpreter. Part 2, PHP code can be mixed with HTML markup. This means that inside a single web page, you can use both HTML and PHP together. For example, you might use HTML for the layout of your page and PHP to display dynamic content like the current date or user information. Part 3. You can include comments inside your PHP code. Comments are optional, but they're very helpful. They allow you to explain what each part of your code does so that you, or anyone reading your code later, can understand it easily. Once you finish writing your code, save the file with a .php extension. For example, example.php. Then, place it in your web server's root folder, usually inside the XAMPP htdocs directory, and run it in your browser using localhost/example.php. And that's it. You've just learned the basic structure of a PHP script, how to use the right editor, how to organize your code, and how PHP works together with HTML to build dynamic web pages. Now let's talk about one of the most fundamental parts of PHP, the PHP tags. Whenever we write PHP code, it must be placed inside special tags so that the server knows where the PHP code begins and where it ends. Every PHP code block starts with the tag $PHP, written as PHP, and it ends with the tag $, written as. Everything that you write inside these two tags will be executed by the PHP interpreter. Anything outside of these tags is treated as normal text or HTML, and will simply be sent to the browser as it is. Here's the basic syntax for declaring PHP tags. PHP, your PHP code goes here, so whenever you create a PHP file, you must wrap all your logic, such as calculations, database connections, or functions, between these two tags. For example, if you want to display a message, you could write PHP echo, hello world. When this file is opened in a browser, the PHP code runs on the server, and only the result, in this case, hello world, is sent back to the browser as HTML output. In short, PHP tags define the boundaries of executable PHP code, and they are the first thing every PHP programmer needs to master before writing real-world scripts. Now let's understand how PHP works together with HTML. PHP has been designed to integrate perfectly with HTML, which means you can easily mix PHP code inside an HTML page and even use HTML inside PHP when needed. This makes PHP very flexible for web development. You can design the layout and structure of your website using HTML and then use PHP to add dynamic features, like displaying user information, showing the current date, or connecting to a database to pull live data. For example, you might have an HTML web page that includes a PHP section inside it. When a user visits the page, the web server processes the PHP part first, executes the code, and then sends the final HTML output to the browser. In short, HTML handles how your page looks, while PHP handles what your page does, the logic, the processing, and the dynamic content. The image mentions code snippet 1, which will show a simple PHP script that displays a message on the web page. This is one of the easiest ways to see how PHP and HTML work together in real time. So remember, HTML builds the structure of the website, and PHP brings it to life with interactivity and functionality.